Thank you everyone for joining. I'm so happy to be back here to bring you another live stream on Stryd Footpath. My name is Angus. I am live streaming here from the Stryd office here in Boulder, Colorado. And I have some really exciting data to show off to you and present some really cool and interesting techniques on how to analyze your Stryd Footpath information. And I think this is really going to empower. If you've been running a Stryd Duo, you've been looking at your Stryd Footpath. I've been seeing the questions come through community. Everyone's super excited. Everyone's sharing their data, and I hope that this adds to the conversation and really gives you those interesting those insights with some new techniques to analyze your data. So specifically, I'm going to be analyzing recent 5K and 12K races. These are from within the last 2 weeks here, and we're going to be looking at what Stryd Path looks like in race conditions. So the 5K race 13 days ago executed around 103% of critical power, which is pretty normal. Typically, we're looking at that 103 to 105% of critical power, maybe even a little higher for a 5K race. Finishing time of 19 minutes and 20 seconds. This did contribute to my power duration curve. And then a 12K race from just a few days ago executed 96% of critical power. And a time of 49 minutes. So, 12K is kind of an off distance for a race. So there's not a typical guideline for, what percentage of critical power you're typically going to be running that race at. But based on the race power calculator, this was also a pretty normal within kind of my range of expectation for how I perform. And this also contributed to my power duration curve. So two pretty great races, both contributing to the power duration curve. So some really good opportunity to look at some data and understand Stryd Footpath in performance conditions. And I kind of want to grade my performance as well. This is always a good practice after you execute a critical power test or execute a race, see what went well, see how you could have performed better. So I'm going to be grading my performance here, and how I'm, the criteria I'm kind of grading it on is first meeting the race criteria for an accurate race prediction. Of course, you want to meet that race criteria to get an accurate prediction from the Stryd race power calculator. That means your race predictions are going to be extremely accurate, and that you can kind of use that as your baseline for racing. Performed at or above the power output for the prediction over the course of the race, and then also even power splits. So all three of these are absolutely critical. Understanding your performance by performing the right activities ahead of your race, performing at that level during your race, and then keeping the power splits even. So for these two races, based on the data, I've given myself an 8 out of 10 for the 5K race and a 7.5 out of 10 for the 12K race. And I kind of upped that just a point and half a point because the 5K race, I had a good time. It was within my expectations. And the 12K race, it was snowing that day. The ground was very slick, so I kind of bumped that up a point. But this goes to show that both these races were executed at a pretty high level, and I was pretty satisfied with both. So once again, it's a good opportunity to look at the data. And the data we're going to be looking at today is the Stryd Footpath, and that's produced by the Stryd Duo. So recently we announced the Stryd Duo, taking a Stryd pod, putting on each side of the body, putting it on each foot, and collecting those dual-sided metrics in terms of second-by-second metrics for ground contact time, leg spring stiffness, vertical oscillation, and impact loading rate. And then also collecting the highly visual interactive Stryd Footpath. And that's the data we're primarily going to be looking at today and analyzing. And once again, we have really 5 groundbreaking use cases for the Stryd Footpath information. That is injury, recovery from injury, drills, understanding how drills impact your form, impact your footpath, footwear, seeing how footwear impacts your footpath. We're going to be looking at the performance use case today, and then also fatigue. So I've done some past live streams on fatigue. Subscribe to the Stryd YouTube channel and check out some of those past live streams if you want to understand kind of how fatigue looks like in a race condition. And specifically, we're going to be looking at performance. Since we're looking at races and seeing how performance has changed over the course of 2 weeks, and how basically I can learn from these races to improve my performance in the future, we're really honing in on that use case today. So yeah, let's jump into it here, the Stryd Footpath demo. So first, let's just start with kind of that familiar second-by-second data view you get from Stryd Power Center. We can see this 5K race here. And the reason I gave myself a a rating that wasn't perfect here is because the power splits weren't perfect. There were points where I did drop underneath critical power for 5K races. You should typically be running above critical power. So there were moments where I was not positioning myself well among the other runners. I wasn't able to really get that full power output. I wasn't really coming around the corners. I hadn't practiced that. There were a lot of turns on this race course. So even though the power execution was, the overall power execution was good, I can't improve my pacing, my splits, working on my skill execution in terms of turning the corners here. And then for the 12K race, so stayed under critical power most of the time. Still, I think I could have performed a little bit better if there wasn't snow on the ground for this race. But this is kind of the familiar second by second view you're getting when you're looking at your data on Power Center. We can see those left-right metrics too that are new from Stryd Duo. And these are things that I do analyze as part of my analysis here, but to keep this presentation super focused, I'm just going to jump straight into the footpath information here. And we built this really powerful tool to enable you to visualize your Stryd footpath from side view, top view, and back view here. So we're looking at the side view of both runs, the average footpath over both runs here. And we can also change that to the back view and the top view as well. And you can also always turn on the reference image here by tapping that toggle in the top right to really get that strong reference of what you're looking at there. So we can see there from the top view as if you're looking down from the top of the runner, the back view as if you're following behind a runner, and then also the side view, kind of akin to, if someone was running on the treadmill and you're viewing their gait from the side. And the other thing we can see here is we are visualizing both these runs, both the left foot and the right foot for both activities here. And we can also look at this, this gauge here to really understand that. And the solid line is that 5K race and the dashed line is the 12K race. So first I want to look at these footpaths in isolation. And this is always a really useful technique if you're looking at your Stryd footpath for the first time, is just toggle off one of those races and let's look at an isolation here. And what I can do is just select a section of that activity. And one of the first things I always do is look at how that Stryd footpath changed over the course of the activity here. So since this was only around a 20-minute effort, I'm just going to grab about a 4-minute section here and just pull across and see how this Stryd footpath changes over the course of the run. And this kind of gives me a sense of things that majorly changed over the course of the race. Of course, there's always going to be variation as a result of small speed changes, as changes of running up and down inclines. So some changes here to be expected, but as long as there's no major kind of trends on how this footpath changes, I would view this as pretty stable. And we do see that even selecting longer time windows, such as a 10-minute time window, which averages things out more, and then pulling across, we really see that over the course of 20 minutes, the Stryd footpath was pretty stable. The other thing I want to look at here is the asymmetry and, primarily viewing that back kick height and, how far I'm kicking forward here and viewing for stability there and seeing if there's any asymmetry across legs. And overall, this is pretty stable. The height on here, we can see this feature in the footpath is pretty stable. And in terms of how far I was kicking forward, it was also pretty stable here as well over the course of the run. I don't really see a lot of asymmetry or fatigue-related asymmetry in this activity. So those are two things you want to do the first time you look at your footpath is select the section, see how that changes, and also monitor your asymmetry. So let's do the same for the 12K effort now. And we can see here, this was a longer effort, so I'm going to select a slightly bigger time window, around 10 minutes here. And I'm going to pull this across, and we can see that there is slightly more change over the course of this 12K race than the 5K race. And, that's not necessarily surprising, definitely for longer efforts, depending on what type of runner you are, there is the opportunity for more fatigue where, some runners might fatigue faster at higher intensities. And, some runners might fatigue differently when they're running for longer durations. So that is helpful to kind of, build your runner profile, keep that in mind and understand, where do I fatigue? Is it intensity or is it duration related? And it could be both. It can also be both for some runners, but that is something to interesting to keep in mind here. And we can see that definitely in this activity, there was a asymmetry change, not in the first part of the race here. You can see that kind of the feature of the footpath here, it was pretty stable in terms of height and in terms of how far I was kicking. But as I move towards the second half, the kick distance, kind of stayed the same here, but the definitely I was not, it wasn't as high in this feature of the footpath here. So that's something to keep in mind here, that I did start to show possibly some symmetry, some fatigue related asymmetry here. So after you've kind of viewed those runs in isolation, I definitely recommend to then view them together and see how things change over the course of the run here. And we can see here, once again, the solid lines are that 5K race, the dashed lines are that 12K race here. And you can see that asymmetry difference here, where that right foot was not kicking as high during the 12K race on average. And it was a commonality across both runs that the left foot was kicking further forward. So, but the major change here is there definitely was possibly some fatigue related asymmetry. And if I go into the first part of this run, we see that didn't really show itself. Actually, the footpath is pretty stable during the first part of the 12K race. But as I move into the second half of the 12K race, then definitely we can see that asymmetry really started to manifest itself. So the question is, why is this? Was this related to duration? Was this related to grade? Was it related to some other factor? And that's definitely a question I'm asking myself, and something I want to further improve and understand better, because we can see here, the average elevation for the 5K race was 0%, basically perfectly flat on average. And then for that 12K race here, you can see, I'm just peeking around my monitor here to see that exact value there. I was running on a slight downhill during the first part of that race, even though I was running. Let me turn on the other really cool thing you can do here is toggle on metrics. So you can view your pace metrics, vertical oscillation, impact loading rate. You can view all of your metrics here in this left panel here to really help quantify what you're looking at. And we can see that in terms of power and in terms of pace, I was running, with slightly less power, slightly slower during the 12K race, which is of course expected and natural, even though the footpath looks pretty similar. And then as I moved into the second half of that 12K race, my power only dropped by about 10 watts. But you can see there's a pretty substantial change in the footpath here. So we can just see that kind of the second part of the race versus the first part, where my power here at the first part is 417 watts, moving later in the race around 403 watts, around 10 watts, 15-watt difference. But once again, you see a pretty drastic difference in how that footpath changes. So what I'm viewing here is possibly I did start to fatigue right at that 20-minute point, which is why I did not see a lot of fatigue in that 5K race. And also, there's possibly a change in my form as I started running uphill. There was a slight uphill around 0.4% grade, which is not substantial for a lot of people. This does have a pretty big impact on my gait, obviously. So definitely some questions I'm walking away with from this analysis are, do I need to work my fatigue resistance after 20 minutes? And that could possibly involve incorporating some of those longer race-paced workouts, more intervals that kind of, at faster intensities that help build my fatigue resistance. And do I need to work in some more hill repeats into my training in order to, keep that more consistent, symmetrical gait as I start running uphill? So those are my two big takeaways, where the 5K race executed, with a more even power, a more symmetrical, stable footpath over the course of the race, where the 12K also a pretty good race, but definitely some signs of change in the footpath, which is something I can learn from and, alter my training, make some changes in training so I can perform better the next time I run in that distance, whether it's 10K or, half marathon. Any distance kind of around that 12K point, I know that skills I need to work on to better improve my performance. And just to summarize those, once again, skills, how can I improve my uphill running capability? Symmetry, am I more symmetrical when I run faster, or is asymmetry a result of fatigue? And resistance. So I determined around, you know, 20 minutes, I do start to see noticeable changes in my stride footpath in race conditions. So what should I be doing to, basically improve that, improve those patterns in my stride footpath? What kind of workout should I be doing to, create that more symmetrical footpath going forward? So this is data I'm going to continue to collect. Look at this in the key workouts I'm doing to change my training, improve my training, and that is really going to hopefully result in, advantageous changes in my footpath as well, and result in improved performance, which is, ultimately my goal right now. So I know we have some questions here. I'm really flattered, really happy with everyone's questions. I'm going to be touching on that in a second. If you do want to, if you're not running with Stryd Duo yet, you can embark on your journey today and start collecting Stryd footpath information. All of this data I'm collecting right now is helping build my performance, build my profile, helping me learn, help inform my training for the future. For example, I might be comparing a workout I do 2 weeks from now with a workout I did 2 weeks ago, and I don't even know that data from 2 weeks ago is going to be useful, but when I complete the workout a few weeks from now and I make that comparison, I could see, I could learn something and, go live and show you guys, of course, but that can help inform my training for the future, and help add that context. So if you do think this information is going to be useful, it's always better to start collecting data sooner rather than later to help build that profile, especially for those key workouts and race intensities. So now I'm going to answer your questions. So we have a few questions from Learning Fast, and the first question is, what shoes was this activity run with? What shoes was I wearing? So as some of you know, I do wear On shoes mostly. Of course, I wear all different brands of shoes, but I have been racing in On shoes. So I'm wearing the Cloudboom Echo 3, which, of course, shoes are highly personal. You always have to choose the shoe that's best for you. Right now, the Cloudboom Echo 3 is working really well for me, and both of those races were in the Cloudboom Echo 3. So that's another important variable, and one of the other benefits of Stryd Footpath is you can start to see how the effect that different shoes have on your footpath. So, for example, if I, let's say something about my gait changes, my form changes, my performance changes, and I try out a different pair of shoes and I determine those are better, I can, or I think they might be better, I can use that Stryd Footpath information to really quantify and understand what, how is that changing my gait? Are those changes advantageous for me? So, um, that speaks to one of the use cases of Stryd Footpath, and also speaks to the importance of keeping variables consistent. So, since both those shoes were executed both those races were executed in the same shoes, it's easy for me to make a direct comparison and kind of eliminate that variable. Another question from Learning Fast here. My right versus left footpaths are drastically different. My right footpath is dramatically smaller than my dominant left footpath. It is consistent for different paces. Is that typical? And yeah, that can be very typical. And you can see here, I was looking at my side view of my Stryd footpath here. But when I open up my back view of my footpath, you can see things do look pretty different here, and this is normal. And I expect that every runner is going to have some kind of asymmetry they can point out, and it's important to keep building data on this so you can kind of see how things are changing over time, start seeing the trends in your performance, and that'll help inform your understanding of your footpath moving forward. So, for example, I primarily talked about the side view because I think that's the most straightforward to understand. But as I start building up more data on my back view, as building up more data with my Stryd footpath, and as runners become more comfortable with the back view, I'm definitely going to be talking about more views as well. So, I think it's critical to look at your footpath from all the different views and understand how it's changing in all three different planes. And a comment from Learning Fast: it is so helpful to see what other people's footpaths look like, so you can see what is normal and what is not. And yeah, I totally agree. I think it's important to share your learnings in the Stryd community. If you have any learnings, share those. Share what kind of analysis and techniques you're using to look at your data, and that'll help inform other runners, basically understanding of their footpaths, so then they can, of course, improve and share their learnings back to you. So it's kind of a collaborative journey, and I'm really grateful and happy people are sharing their footpaths, and I'm thrilled to be sharing mine as well. So in terms of next steps for the footpath, we are going to have more live streams, so definitely subscribe to the Stryd YouTube channel here. We're also live on Facebook, so give us a like there, turn on notifications for when we go live, when we make new posts. We're going to have tons of educational material coming out for Stryd Footpath over the next couple months. We're also working on some incredible written material with some top coaches that is going to be going out to our blog and different channels as well. So stay tuned for that. Stay subscribed to the email list. Subscribe on YouTube here, and keep an eye on the blog. We'll make a post, so we'll send an email when that information is available. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for your questions. We'll be back soon with another live stream.